Imagine waking up to find your world turned upside down by one unexpected discovery. The black maid slept on the floor with the twins. The millionaire saw it. And then what happened? The Whitmore mansion was silent, except for the soft hum of the heating system. Outside, the wind rattled against the tall windows, but inside, the air was warm, too warm for Grace, who had been on her feet for 14 straight hours. She adjusted her teal maid's uniform and rubbed her forearm through the yellow cleaning gloves. The skin beneath stung where the bruise from earlier was beginning to darken. She had learned to keep her head down, to swallow her words when the tone in the house turned sharp. But tonight was different. The twins lay on a thin white blanket on the carpet, dressed in identical light blue onyxes. They were barely 3 months old, too small, too fragile for a home this cold in spirit. Grace knelt beside them, watching their chests rise and fall in sync. When she'd started the job 6 months ago, she had been told her duties was strictly housekeeping. But the truth revealed itself within a week. The hired nannies didn't last, and whenever one quit, no replacement came. It was easier for the Whites to expect Grace to fill in than to actually hire someone new. Their mother had been gone for just 3 months, lost during childbirth, leaving behind 2 tiny lives who had never known her touch. The staff spoke of her softly, almost reverently, as if raising their voices might disturb her memory. Their father, Elliot Whitmore, was the kind of man whose voice could fill a boardroom and whose name could move markets. But when it came to his children, he was a shadow. Earlier that evening, the twins had cried for nearly an hour. Grace had tried everything: bottles, rocking, humming softly in her native tongue. One was feverish, his tiny fists clenching in discomfort, while the other wailed until his voice was hoarse. By the time they settled, Grace's back ached, and her arms trembled from holding them. The living room lamp cast a golden glow across the carpet. Grace didn't dare put the babies in their nursery. The air in there was cold, and the crib mattresses too firm. So she stayed with them where it was warmest, lying down on the carpet so they wouldn't be alone. Her head rested lightly on her arm, just inches from the boys. She could feel their warmth, hear the faint sound of their breaths. Exhaustion pulled at her, but she forced herself to stay alert. If they stirred, she would know instantly. Her thoughts drifted to the muffled shouting she'd heard from upstairs earlier. The slam of a door, heavy footsteps pacing. This house had a way of swallowing kindness, replacing it with tension that seeped into every corner. She worried what that meant for the twins growing up in it. Grace had worked in many homes before, but something about these children stirred something fierce and protective in her. She couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the way they clung to her shirt when she picked them up, or the way their cries eased when she whispered to them. They had no one else. She wasn't about to fail them. Still, her body was betraying her. Hours of cleaning, tending to them, and skipping dinner had left her laden. Her eyelids grew heavier with each blink. She told herself she'd close them for just a moment, just long enough to regain her strength. The house was too still to warn her. The front door opened without a sound, the footsteps that followed purposeful and quick. Elliot stepped into the living room doorway, his navy suit immaculate, his red tie sharp against the white shirt beneath. A briefcase hung from one hand, his other still on the doorknob. His eyes froze on the sight before him, his maid sprawled on the floor beside his children, the twins asleep on the carpet, their flushed cheeks pressed together. Grace's gloved hand lying protectively over the edge of the blanket, and he noticed now the faint bruise blooming across her cheek. His voice broke the stillness like a blade. What the hell is going on here? Grace's eyes snapped open. Her pulse spiked as she sat up quickly, glancing between him and the twins. One of the boys stirred, letting out a soft whimper. I asked you a question. Elliot's tone was sharper now, stepping further into the room. Why are my children on the floor? And why are you lying there like? He stopped, his gaze lingering on her bruise. What happened to your face? She opened her mouth, but the words tangled. They were crying, as she managed. No one came. They needed. They have a nanny for that, he cut in. No, Grace said quietly but firmly, meeting his eyes. They don't. It's just me. A flicker of something unreadable passed across his expression, but his voice stayed cold. We'll talk in my office now. Grace glanced down at the sleeping twins. Her chest tightened. She had no idea that after this conversation, the truth about why these children had been left in her care and why she had bruises of her own would finally come to light. But what if this confrontation revealed secrets that could heal a broken family, or tear it apart forever? Grace rose slowly, her knees stiff from the hours on the floor. Elliot's eyes followed her every movement as she stepped away from the twins, careful not to wake them. She could still feel their warmth against her skin, a reminder of why she'd stayed there in the first place. In the office, the door clicked shut behind them. The fire in the corner cast a faint orange glow over Elliot's face, deepening the lines of suspicion etched across it. Explain, he said, setting the briefcase down with a thud. Grace took a breath, her hands trembling. The twins. They've had no proper care for weeks. The last nanny quit, and no one replaced her. I clean, I cook, and I watch them because no one else will. Today, one of them had a fever. I couldn't leave him in that cold nursery. So, I stayed with them in the warmest place I could find. His jaw tightened. That still doesn't explain why you were lying there. She met his gaze unflinching, despite the tremor in her chest. Because I was exhausted. I worked from dawn, and I haven't eaten since morning. They finally stopped crying, and I. She faltered, swallowing the lump in her throat. I didn't mean to fall asleep, but I would do it again if it meant they felt safe. Elliot's expression shifted, anger giving way to something heavier. And the bruise? Grace's fingers instinctively touched her cheek. One of your guests, she said quietly. Last week during the party, I was carrying a tray near the hall. He said I was in the way and shoved me. I fell. No one noticed. Or maybe they did, but no one cared. Elliot leaned back, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. He remembered that night, the champagne, the laughter, the way his so-called friends paraded through the house. He had been upstairs closing a deal on the phone. He hadn't seen it, or hadn't bothered to. You should have told me, he muttered. Grace's voice broke. Would it have mattered? You don't even see them, Mr. Whitmore. You don't see your sons. All they have is me, and even I'm nothing here. I'm just the help. The silence stretched. Elliot turned toward the window, the reflection of the firelight flickering in his eyes. His mind churned with images, his late wife, the twins' first cries, and all the days he'd buried himself in work to avoid feeling the emptiness her absence left behind. Finally, he spoke. Stay here, he said, leaving the office abruptly. Grace stood frozen, unsure what he meant. Moments later, she heard his footsteps returning. He carried 2 small blue blankets, the ones from the nursery. Without a word, he draped them over the sleeping twins, tucking the edges gently around their tiny bodies. Grace watched from the doorway. This was the first time she'd ever seen him kneel beside them. There, smaller than I remember, he murmured. His hand hovered over their heads, hesitant, as if afraid to touch something so fragile. Grace stepped closer, her voice soft. They need you, not just your name on their birth certificates. He looked up at her then, and for a moment, the weight of all he'd missed was written plainly across his face. I've been a coward, he admitted. I thought if I stayed busy, I wouldn't feel the loss. But it's cost them more than I realized. When he rose, his tone was different, no longer sharp, but steady. From now on, things change. You won't clean another floor in this house unless you choose to. You'll be their caregiver officially, and you'll be paid as such. And that man who laid a hand on you? His eyes hardened. He'll never set foot here again. Grace's chest tightened. Why? She asked quietly. Because you protected my children when I didn't, and I don't intend to fail them, or you, again. The weeks that followed were different. Elliot was present at breakfast, reading to the twins before leaving for work. Grace found herself laughing with them more, not out of obligation, but out of shared joy. The house no longer felt like a museum. It felt like a home. One rainy afternoon, Grace sat on the sofa with a twin in each arm. Elliot returned early, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder. He paused in the doorway, smiling at the sight. Room for one more? He asked. She nodded, and he sat beside them, pulling the boys into his lap. Grace leaned back, letting herself breathe for the first time in months. For the twins, the memory of those cold, empty days would fade. But for Elliot and Grace, the lesson would stay. Family isn't defined by roles or titles. It's defined by who shows up when it matters most. And that night, for the first time, all four of them fell asleep in the same room, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for Whisper Fable for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. And let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love hearing from all of you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching.